Thank you so much, and wonderful to be with you all. What a lovely, amazing set of memories there. The retreat was so uplifting for so many of us. So thank you again, Peter and Stephen and the whole team for making that possible. It was really special. I've been tasked to give a very short summary of a wonderful series that actually began last fall and carried on through the retreat. Uh, just to give a little bit of background, at the Mockler Center for Faith and Ethics in the Public Square, where I'm the associate director with Ken Barnes, who's the director at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, we have been working on a topic that we have called Sabbath as Resilience. And part of the idea with this is following up on a book called Redeeming Capitalism by Dr. Barnes. The philosophy here is that there is a lot of pressure in capitalism and a postmodern capitalism, and that how does our faith in Jesus and the understanding of the gospel create resilience in us to show up in our spaces of work and life. And so the idea of Sabbath as the toolkit that God has given us to do that seemed like a really exciting opportunity. So we have been working on that in a book where we're developing all of these different themes. And so we were privileged to be able to partner with Faith in Business to create these series based on the chapters of the book that also coincided with Faith in Businesses themes for their webinar. And the first was really an introduction, Sabbath as Resilience, working from rest, really setting the tone for the series of all of these different push and pull factors in work life and in society, and what are the different aspects that we can look at using Sabbath as a prism to see the world, as opposed to a discipline of just one day or actions or time. And I think that was a really exciting and interesting opening for us to investigate different dimensions of this prism. And then from Sabbath as Resilience, which was the original discussion, what are the different theological touch points that we can draw on? We had our fellow and faculty member at Gordon Conwell, Autumn Ridenour, talk about Sabbath as reprioritization, building off St. Augustine's idea that we are creatures made for the Sabbath. And this wonderful quote, of course, from him, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until it rests in you." And her whole chapter and talk was really on this idea that Augustine talks about, which is self-fragmentation, and how in the current world we are fragmented, and that we have to reorder our loves. And that was a really important set of ideas. She weaves in technology and different aspects in her talk, and also in the chapter of the book where you'll be able to read, hopefully soon this year. Then we moved on with our fellow Nat Gant, who's a lawyer by training and currently leading a law school in North Carolina. And Nat really zeroes in on his work, both as a professor and as a lawyer, talking about this idea that we can't get it all done. And so what does that do to us? The frustration, all of that comes from this feeling of inadequacy in a really busy world. And he talks about how, from many different theological standpoints, but also building off of what especially lawyers have to do to get through the work, and is resting in God, and ultimately understanding that time is good, and it is from God, and that it has no inherent value apart from God, and that it is good and sacred. And so how do we understand biblical time? And so Nat really gave us a lot to chew on in that discussion. And then we had Cara Martin with Sabbath as Reimagination. As some of you may recall, she had a really wonderful story about a hospital visit, and this woman in the hospital, and as someone came to visit them, she said, "Be careful, this is holy ground." The idea that we can reconsecrate space in our everyday life, we can make moments sacred and places sacred, and that we're using our Sabbath rest as not just for being restored, but actually for being restoried. Talks about the narrative of Sabbath as helping us to restory our lives of what is meaningful around us. And then the talk that I got a chance to do with Michael on Sabbath as Renewal what's a really beautiful opportunity to talk a little bit more about relationships, leading from the heart, what it means to actually be a person where you're a relationship of rest, where people can find rest in your friendship. And how do we do that in a busy world? And how do we do that for ourselves in order to be there for other people? And then we had professor or a real philosopher, Jeff Hansen, who's a fellow at the Mockler Center, talk about his work on Sabbath as redemption, bringing in Hannah Arendt and reminding us the important aspects of this juxtaposition, right, between labor and leisure, between play and rest and work, and what is the interplay between all of these, and how important it is to create space for play, and how in some ways this concept of work is very fluid. And how do we understand that from her incredible work as a philosopher? So those were some of the takeaways. I hope those are helpful reminders of some of the nuggets of joy and wisdom and insight that we got. And of course, the conversations from all of you were really enriching and made the conversations feel very present and relevant. So thank you for that. And I think I'll ask the panelists to come and share their initial reflections on how they experienced the series and also the retreat. And so I think we'll start with Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah, and great to be able to share. Just to introduce myself, I live and work in Cambridge for a small cybersecurity company, and was privileged to join in on the retreat recently. And I think that my own relationship with rest is maybe like a lot of people actually probably created through, I think, especially experiences of burnout throughout different stages of my life. Probably earliest at school, at boarding school, and then again, I think at university, and then again in probably most recently 5 years ago. And so this topic's, I think, especially close to my heart because it's an area that I've really struggled with to find rest, to find balance and healthy boundaries. So thank you for the organizers for sort of putting it on and making it available. And my main takeout, my main area that I think I like especially is redemption. I just think of Adam and Eve in the garden and how, yeah, work was definitely a curse, but perhaps there was a blessing in there as well. If we just think of the encounters that we might have had at work. And for me, it was literally redemptive. If I think back to about 2014 when I wasn't a Christian and I was working for a charity in environmental outreach, working in schools in Cape Town, and it turned out that the guy I was working with at that school was a Christian, and every time I'd go every week to that school, he would start evangelizing just straight out, and I'd be trying to focus on the work about the vegetable garden we were setting up at the school, and every time this guy just kept on talking to me about the Bible and about God, and I didn't really know what to make of it until he said these two things. You know, the only thing that can change you is God, and the only thing that can fill that hole in your life is Jesus. And that just changed everything for me because I realized I was really scattered. Every time I went to that school, my mind was all over the place. There was so much to do. That was one of many schools that I was visiting. And so that was just the pattern of my life. So I'm so grateful that I was redeemed through work, you know, in that literal sense. And I think since then, yeah, it's just been a case of growing and learning to the point where I'm hoping now to be a sort of non-anxious presence at work and to be able to um, just share a sense of faith, but maybe just faith in action and yeah, the beauty in work. With my colleagues, we've got a small prayer group at work as well, and that feels like a sort of restful space within a busy week. And in fact, one of my bosses says he comes to work to rest because he's got three small kids at home, which is a whole different perspective. But yeah, I'm just thinking more about redemption and that there's so much there. Just thinking of Jesus uh, working as a carpenter, and he probably didn't have to work, but perhaps he chose to work, like he sort of chose in a way to be baptized. You know, he didn't necessarily have to be baptized, but that's my takeout really. And I think it's over to you then, Matthew.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm Matthew Kimpton-Smith. I'm the owner and was running a family engineering business. We make machinery for things like carbon fiber up until 8 years ago. And 8 years ago, I had a cardiac arrest whilst out cycling and fairly serious brain injury. You can read about that in my book, Second Chance. Quick plug. But what it did was it forced me to rest. It forced me to step back. It forced me to stop. I had no choice. I mean, I literally couldn't make a decision between a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. I couldn't remember anything back to 2010 and about 80% back to 2000. But what it did do was, as a business owner, I was still fully responsible for my business and what was going on, even though I knew very little about it. But what the Lord's taught me, and he's still teaching me daily, and I strongly, strongly believe, right to my core, that business is, well, I say, the battleground of the future. But relationships formed at work are, I believe, the primary way we will get out the gospel. I believe established church has lost its way. And many of us struggle on a Sunday, building relationships, taking friends to church, introducing them to Jesus. But the battleground, the opportunity of the workplace for us to be Christians day in, day out, with colleagues, friends, people we've known for decades or even just a few days, we get a chance to exhibit Jesus's love and what he came and share our faith with them. But I don't believe many of us know how to do that, if not all of us struggle. Part of the reason I wrote this again, plug Second Chance, was it's an opportunity to talk to people about death and the fact that we have this really precious life. But if we're not going out there as Christians and getting people to think about life and what it means and what they're here for and why they're here and how long they're here, who's going to do that? And I believe the responsibility for us as business people is to make business I say battleground of the future. It's the wrong word, but business is the place where we can share our faith appropriately. But we need to do that together. We need to encourage each other. We need to understand what works, what doesn't. But if we're not getting out to our colleagues, mates that don't know Christ, who will? And I think the business is where we need to do it. You can tell I'm quite passionate about this now.
All right.
So, Sarah,
Hi,
would you like
everyone.
me to pass on to Xavier? Xavier, over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Hi, everyone. My name is Xavier. I'm originally from Pakistan, but currently living in Cambridge. And yeah, I had wear different hats in my past. Work-wise, I used to run my company, a textile company back in Pakistan. Uh, I have a business degree and done marketing, digital marketing, SEOs, operations, human resource, you name it. And my faith, I was very fortunate enough to be born in a Christian family, so my faith was there from the beginning with me. And yeah, it continues to grow. Uh, Up till now, I feel like I'm very close to God and He's very close to me, and I feel incredibly blessed by Him. And oh boy, the retreat. The retreat was just an eye opener for me. You know, I honestly wasn't expecting the things which I experienced there. And thank you, Peter and Stevens, for giving me that opportunity to be there among such a remarkable Christian leaders and entrepreneur who was nothing short of inspiration for me. I mean, each interaction was a treasure trove of wisdom, insight, and encouragement. And especially, I would like to mention one of the enhanced side of retreat was like I was very impressed and grateful for the openness and generosity with which everyone shared their experience and perspective. These exchanges have enriched my understanding and inspired me deeply. So thank you, everyone, again for that. My takeaway from the retreat was prioritization. I think rest, as in my culture where I come from, was an alien concept. We all used to familiar with the word rest, but we never really practice, and there's no concept of resting back in my culture. So and there are a lot of speakers said a lot of good things in there, and I was truly stunned by how they portray rest, and how they say that rest is not a choice, but it's a command. You should stop, and it's by God. And that was one of my most valuable takeaway. And that opportunity to learn about the concept of rest and its significance in our life, the insights shared during the retreat, that they really sparked a newfound understanding of importance of rest in me, and actually not only in me as an individual level, but also within a broader context of culture. And truly, I'm eager to apply these lessons and inspire a culture of rest and rejuvenation, not just within my intimate circle, but also within the wider community of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, and where I know. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Xavier, and hello everyone. My name's Ruth Jackson. I lead the PR and communications for Stewardship, one of the sponsors of the retreat. Stewardship's a Christian charity, and we support both donors and the causes that they give to. So that was the reason, really, for my engagement with Faith and Businesses last year. I had come along to a couple of webinars during the pandemic period. I've known Stephen for a while through my previous church in Cambridge. But yes, it was really the last year that I got more involved again. And it's been, at a personal level, quite a God instance, because God's certainly been knocking on my door for a while, trying to tell me, Ruth, you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And I've been answering that door, but struggling to welcome rest in. So it's been it was just amazing. I'll echo what Xavier said. I found the Faith Business Retreat absolutely amazing, the way it spoke to me personally. And like Xavier, my biggest takeout was on reprioritization. I came away from the retreat with a fresh revelation that this business of resting in God, it's a command. We are, to quote the Bible, we are commanded to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It's non-negotiable. It's non-optional. But reflecting on that further, that could sound like a kind of heavy burden, a joyless duty to perform. And it occurred to me that it's far from that. It's actually a really wonderful, beautifully wrapped gift from God, yet another expression of his amazing generosity to us. And really, when we don't pay attention to it, it's almost like being that rude person that doesn't properly acknowledge a gift, leaving the gift under the tree. I mean, who would do that to anyone, let alone God? So I felt quite convicted in that regard, because I know this is an area that as I say, that God's been speaking to me about. But I think it goes even beyond that, because, yes, it's a gift from God, and we're all the better for it when we learn truly to rest in him. But the wonderful thing is that in addition to that, the gift then, as we unpack it, as we delight in it, I'm beginning to realize God's showing me how that gift then blesses others. It helps us to be that generous person that can bless others with our time, our energy, might be our finances as well. I mean, one of the wonderful things, many wonderful things from the retreat that was burned in my mind was this idea of being radically generous with our love for others. I want to be one of those people that's radically generous with love for others. And we can't be. That can only remain an aspiration if we don't actually follow this command. So those were really my sort of 3 key points, you know, that yes, it's a command, but it's a wonderful gift. And in embracing it, we get to embrace others. And that all sounds wonderful. How am I getting along with this? How am I doing? Am I all sorted? Have I got rest nailed? I shared with Sarah just before we jumped on this call that I was reflecting on the irony, you know, this last day or two, I've been unaccountably feeling, maybe somebody going to say this sounds a bit hyper spiritual, but for no accountable reason, nothing bad's happening. You know, it's just a normal, busy working week. I was feeling under attack, you know, feeling unexpectedly, unaccountably a bit discouraged, a bit low in mood and energy, and feeling old anxieties beginning to flare up. And this morning I was reflecting on my dog walk and I thought, no, in Jesus' name, no, I'm going to just pray against that. So, yeah, it's, I think as we activate in this area, we shouldn't be surprised if we get challenged. And the 3 key things, it's not new things, but the 3 key things that I'm really trying to focus on even more, things that I've been trying to, I suppose, adopt into my life as helpful disciplines anyway, is to really bookend my day with God. Bev Shepherd, in talking about reprioritization, talked about Sabbath as beginning and end. And I think we all know this, when we bookend our day, I mean, through the day as well, but when we bookend our day, you know, I just start with, I have YouVersion, there's lots of apps, a little bit of time in God's word, a bit of prayer, and then hopefully at the end of the day as well, it really helps. And when I miss that or skip it a little bit because I'm rushing for a train to London, I notice the difference. But of course, it's not just beginning and end, it's throughout the day. And we talked a lot in the retreat about how to weave God into the busy moments. It's not about doing nothing necessarily. So for me, that might look like a breath prayer at my desk. It might look like meditating on a verse that I have stuck somewhere near my screen. In fact, as a screensaver, top tip, I got this from a colleague, I actually have on my screen, my verse I go to, could be anything that speaks to you, Psalm 121, which reminds me every time I log onto my screen, where does my help come from? It comes from you, God, you know, and it encourages me to lift my eyes up and look to him and remember him as my source of strength, my help, my refuge, my fortress, and my everything. So that's really important too. And then I think just practically, you know, I've talked a lot about reprioritization in the spiritual sense, but, you know, at a practical everyday level, you know, we're all busy people. We've got conflicting demands on time. Chris talked powerfully about the big squeeze on our time. So this is something that I struggle with because I'm passionate and I love to just get involved with everything. I'm sure I really annoy some of my colleagues with that. So just trying to get a bit better at going, do you know what? Actually, God, you've given me this one day. What can I do really well in this one day? What really are my key priorities for this one day? And learning to say no with grace to things that really aren't my priority, and or to maybe pass those things on to others. And, you know, part of that generosity thing, thinking about how that can then bless others as well with the opportunities that might give them. It's food for thought for me anyway. And just finally, a final point, lots to say, but it was an interesting reflection for me as well, coming away from the retreat. So in attending the retreat, I missed a recent staff away day at Stewardship. But I came back to discover that the executive team in their wisdom had decided to bless us all with a Sabbath day that we're to take in the next couple of months as a kind of thank you for extra work in a particularly busy period. So what a wonderful, you know, blessing that I am literally being bossed into taking a Sabbath day sometime soon. And maybe for those of us in this call that have got employees, something to consider. But thank you. And it's a pleasure sharing with you.
Ruth, thank you so much. That was so rich and really, really useful and helpful. Thank you for sharing all of that, and the structure of it was very helpful too. I will now open it up for some Q&A. We'd love to hear from all of you on the call, reflections, questions you have to the group, or to the community, or any reflections you want to share. And I know we have one right here in the chat from Alan, and the question from Alan says, we think about Sabbath being one day, but in today's world we have a 2-day weekend. Mad thought, could we be over resting, or is it more about integrating rest with work rather than separating it out too much? And I wonder if anyone on the panel wants to reflect on Alan's question.
Right. If I can go first, guys. Alan and everyone, about Sabbath, I think we get rest wrong. We think that resting or Sabbath is not working, as in going to a place of work where we get remuneration for what we do. I think the Lord's picture of rest is us stepping away from everything and spending time in his presence. And it's receiving a different form of nourishment and filling. And I speak from this experience of being forced to rest. Historically, rest meant for me stopping and trying to recharge my batteries by either doing something different or sleeping or whatever, but I was trying to restore myself. What I found is that when we literally stop and turn to the Lord and wait and let him restore us, that is true rest. And I think that's what we're called to do.
Patrick, Ruth, Xavier, any of you want to weigh in on that question at all?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. Yeah, I would second what you've just shared, Matthew. And it was something we discussed quite a lot, wasn't it, at the retreat, that it absolutely starts, ends, continues with God. I mean, that was the point I was just making. It's also not prescriptive. So what might work for you won't necessarily work for me, in terms of when you take that God time, how you take it. And it doesn't have to be a kind of time delineated thing, as in like, I must, almost like a tick box in my week. I must tick this box, good, job done, taken my rest. We probably do want to think about focus times with God, and that kind of deep soul rest with God. But it's also, it's kind of like a heart attitude that you bring into your whole day. That it's like a kind of, even at your most busy moments where maybe there's even conflict, just having that still small voice of God inside you going, be still, know that I am God. And just having that kind of presence, that peace presence, somewhere in a corner of your head, that just keeps a kind of link to the anchor, if you like, of rest. But yeah, I mean, it's got practical components to it too. Like it is also mixed in with good old-fashioned things like getting your rest and your sleep and your exercise. I think, again, Chris talked about, it's not enough just to take the Sabbath. It's also thinking about making sure that that's really restorative rest. So maybe that's not, certainly not doom scrolling on social, and it's probably not binge watching Netflix either. Sorry, guys. Not to say there's things that have their place, but not really constituting rest. I just want to share as well, actually, something that I am reading right now, and I'm not on commission. It's just been helpful. I had the blessing of attending the women's retreat, Breathe. It's an annual retreat at C3 in Cambridge. Some of you might know of it. And one of the speakers there, Rachel Mawson, who heads up, she's one of the lead pastors at Soul Church in Norwich. This is her book that she's co-written with one of her daughters, Soul Time. And it's just a devotional that you can dip in and out of. And it literally, I just love it. I mean, it's this idea of like soul care, not self-care, but soul care. And you can dip in and out. It's divided into rest, replenish, recharge. But when your soul needs to love, when your soul needs hope, you get the idea. And whatever it is you need in that moment, there's a little devotional there to kind of dip into and just take a little quick refresh with.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ruth. If you want to put that book in the chat, that might be helpful. Xavier, did you have a point you wanted to weigh in on this?
Oh yeah, I would like to echo both Ruth and Matthew in this. I think rest works different for each of us. I think someone mentioned on retreat, and it was very good. And I think I apply that into my life. That like throughout my life, even if I take a day out for resting, I was either binge watching Netflix or reading my emails or getting back to, the things which I didn't able to get back on my working days. So I wasn't really spending time with God. I think for me, what works out is like, okay, I'm not gonna do things which I do journally I'm gonna give more time to God. I might do fasting. I might gonna, read a whole chapter or, just I'm rather than spending time on something which I generally do, I would completely dedicate my day to God and to rest and to just be still with him, knowing that he is around me and kind of like dedicate that whole day to prayers or to just give praise to him and to reconnect to my family. So that really that it shouldn't. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, like everyone has its own theory that works for them, and that's how it should be actually. For me, this is what works. Like for me, the rest is spending more time with God, and whether it's a whole day or an hour or 5 minutes, it's just for me when I sit on praying and like bring a tunnel vision to my focus to only focus on God. I think for me that's rest, and broadly the Sabbath is when I do fasting and not do the journal things which I do. That is something that really works for me.
Thank you so much, Xavier. I really appreciate that. And you all commented on something that I think we all felt at the retreat, which is we really challenged the idea that Sabbath is a day at the retreat. We really understood that, as you're all describing, it's very much integrated into every aspect of our lives. But one thing that really brought home the sort of challenges of ideas of Sabbath and how it can feel is this notion that it has to be done alone. And one amazing thing about the retreat was how powerful we felt rested in community. And I just want to offer that up also as another idea to think through. Fiona, you have your hand up. I'm excited to hear what you're going to share. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for the panel and everything that's been shared so far. And thank you for the retreat. It was amazing. And my only fear and complaint about that video is that it's so gorgeous and so good, is that we're going to double our numbers and I'm going to have an even harder time catching up and chatting with people. And on that note, my biggest joy at the retreat was praying with Xavier. We were partnered together and we spent way more time than was planned praying with people because so many people came for prayer. And so I wonder if it didn't hit a chord, this challenge to work from a place of rest really challenged people because we had queues. And I lead the prayer ministry at my church, and some weeks there's nobody. Every break, people were wanting prayer. So it was amazing. So please think about and pray about signing up for the prayer if you're coming next year, because we need lots more people. I'm sure I'm not overstepping the mark by mentioning that, Peter and Stephen. The biggest thing for me would be 3 words. Rest takes trust. No matter what you apply it to, if we're going to come away with Jesus, it takes trust to leave whatever it is we're leaving. If we're going to not do something, if we're going to reprioritize something, all of those R's takes trust. And it's been really put into action. I won't say tested because I miraculously did it. We moved to Wales 2 weeks and 2 days ago. And my dearest friend, who's a Christian, said, Fiona, you need to stop putting stuff in your diary and just settle. And it has taken trust, to not be afraid that the work won't come. And it's that thing of knowing God's got this, knowing God has got this. He's got you, he's got your life, he's got your future. And the last thing I want to say is, if any of you haven't read Peter's God on Monday from this Monday, it's beautiful. Yeah, read it.